Hey guys, welcome to BP the Bible Perspective. Unpacking misinformation meant to defend whiteness. Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. I came across this video on Monique Dusant's YouTube channel, and the title grabbed me. Slavery in the Bible versus American slavery. Now, there was a couple of reasons why this subject grabbed me. One, because who is presenting it, Monique Dusant. More on that later. But the title itself has become quite, again, there's a lot of misinformation and purpose misinformation, intentional misinformation given on the subject of the slavery in the Bible, and also slavery in America. Now, that said, Monique Dusant caught my attention because I am a subscriber to her YouTube channel. I don't mind supporting people who give out content, even if I disagree with them. And the reason why I'm featuring her is because, as you will see in a moment, there are some pretty astonishing statements that she makes, and positions, which is why I'm featuring, her presentation of this subject, slavery in the Bible versus American slavery. Mainly because of her motive as to why she is what she's presenting. Like I said, I'll get into that in a moment. Now, Monique has joined the ranks of black conservatives / black Christian conservatives. I'm not going to delve into that subject, but it is a very intriguing subject. Believe it or not, Christians themselves, whether black or white, fall more on the conservative camp than any place else. But that's not the point here. Now, what you see is some of the leading kind of face of black conservatism today. There are many more people. This is just a few pictures. And as you can see, it's a wide range of people. You look at the Queen Bee herself, Candace Owens in white. To the right of her, or the left, depending on how you're looking at your screen, is, to me, the nut job, the Reverend Jesse Lee Peters. To her other side left is I forget his name, but he is an upcoming YouTuber himself, a black conservative, and he falls more in the ranks of a Jesse Lee Peters. And then, of course, if you look at who's pictured next to Monique, Larry Elders. Now, if you go to all the way on the top row, is really the patriarch himself of black conservatism, Thomas Sowell. In other words, he's quoted more by black conservatives and even white conservatives. Now, just above Candace Owens is Vodi Bachman, and probably Monique has more in common with him because he is a conservative Christian, a Southern Baptist. Now, what they all have in common, is this defense of white lives, or you can say the white lives matter. Now, this gentleman, his name is Anthony B. Logan. He is an extreme black conservative. The hat he is wearing, 1776, is a response to the 1619 Project. But as you can see, he is very giddy and overjoyed over Kanye and Candace wearing the White Lives Matter sign. He wholeheartedly supported. Now, Monique, then, she's kind of in that ranks, and she, in fact, that picture, I'm going to show you a clip, and I want you to hear from herself. When I say that they have in common is to defend whiteness. Okay, that's a bold statement. To defend whiteness. Listen to Monique herself.
I've clearly stated that I started Center for Biblical Unity to defend white people. You can go back and you can look on a ton of my interviews where I've said that was my sole reason for starting CFBU, was to be able to use my voice on behalf of white people that I didn't see. I didn't see any black people coming out and saying.
Now, her words. Now, I am doing a video in response to that later. But of course, what's problematic about that is that notice she says this is her YouTube channel name, Center for Biblical Unity. Where's the biblical unity in making a statement like that? And if you notice, she didn't say white Christians. She said white people. So that's why, again, when I saw this subject, her video that she presented, slavery in the Bible versus American slavery, now you can understand her motive. You can understand her perspective. This is going to be in defense of white people. Okay? So I'm gonna get into the video, and I'm gonna break it. I'm gonna unpack it as we go. Okay? Because it's quite interesting. Again, the perspective is this defense of, in other words, slavery wasn't so bad. And the reason why slavery was so bad is because, well, white people were involved in it. Now, you're going to hear her own words. So let's get into the video. Where are we at? Here we go.
Is there a difference between the slavery we read about in scripture and American slavery? Or is it all like the same? Because I think that's also, I would say it's a misconception in a lot of places.
Now, notice she says, is it the same? That's a yes and no answer. I'm going to show you scriptures to kind of show you that, yes, it is the same. There is a difference between slavery in the Bible and slavery in American slavery. And we'll bring that out later.
But I've heard like, well, the Bible condones slavery, and that's why, white people like it because they want to rule over everybody. And then there's this whole just pressing down of all of the different narratives to make white people bad.
And there it is. See? And there it is. That the idea of making white people bad. Now, you heard her statement that her sole reason for starting Center for Biblical Unity is to defend white people. Not even the church, not even the Christian, white people. So then her take on slavery is going to be, right, well, they're using that to make white people bad. Well, let's ask the question. Were white people bad? Was America bad? Was slavery bad? Was those who participated in slavery, who owned slaves, who benefited from slaves, were they bad? Let's ask that question. All right.
And thus white people are bad, slavery's bad, it's all just America's bad.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Now this is sort of their go-to guy, Harold Fiedler, and again, not to take from him, I think he had the PhD if I'm not mistaken, but he is going to give his take, and again, let's unpack what he says right here.
So here's the thing. Slavery has always existed. Slavery has existed since the dawn of mankind. It has always existed. It wasn't invented by the Bible.
Now, this is a typical argument of conservatives. Slavery has always existed. That is true. But again, I'm going to unpack, okay, where the misinformation is being applied here.
And actually, in all honesty, the word slavery itself is sort of problematic. And I say it's problematic because the word slavery comes from the word Slav, which were when the Slavic people were taking slaves in Europe during like the 900 AD.
I'm not understanding his point here because they were still slaves. The only thing that happened was that there were English words translated for what we would, you could say, Hebrew, Greek, or whatever the Hebrew, Greek words for slave, it still came out the same. So I don't get his point here. In other words, the word slave, you still was property. You were owned by human beings, and that's, so whether you say it in English, Hebrew, Greek, Chinese, the impact is still the same.
But to your point, there were key differences. First of all, what we have in the Bible is that it wasn't based on race. Race is not a biblical concept. Whenever we read race into the Bible, we are reading something foreign into the Bible.
Now, this is true, but it's also not the point. We'll elaborate on this later. What he's saying is true, but that's not the point. Now, remember, the topic here is American slavery versus biblical slavery. They're going to focus solely on the slavery in the Bible. And I think that's on purpose, and it's meant as a deflection.
And actually, I find that gets rid of a lot of the actual charges against racism in the Bible when you just deal with the fact that there's no such thing as race. And I spend a lot of time in the Bible going through the genealogies, demonstrating that the Jews weren't white and the people around them were black. So it was the white people enslaving the black people. No, nothing like that.
So let's ask the question. Again, see, what he's saying is true, but what he's not saying is, well, then who introduced race in the Bible? Because there were people who introduced race in the Bible. There were white Christians that introduced the genealogies to say that dark skin was cursed by God, that dark skin was cursed and the result of it was slavery. There are Christians, there are denominations in this day that still believe that. Almost every denomination, the Sullivan Baptist, Mormonism, Church of Christ, almost every denomination, Assemblies of God, all of them believe that it was God's will for segregation, that God cursed dark skin. Okay? Almost every denomination. So who introduced this into the Bible? And this is what he's not talking about. And as I said, on purpose. They're not talking about this on purpose. All right? And it's misleading. Or not misleading, it's misinformation to deflect away from that truth. Which, remember, the sole purpose is to defend white people.
The overwhelming majority of people who were slaves, it was more of an indentured servant type of thing.
Okay, let me show you a scripture, because what I decided I was going to do was, as we go by, let me read scriptures here to show you how they are against intentionally misleading people. Okay, let's read. All right. Excuse me. Now, if you remember, he said, excuse me. Which one do I want to look at? Okay. Oh, let me scroll down here. He talked about indentured servant. Let's see. I'll get to that, but let's see. I want to look at the kidnapping here. No, the indentured servant part. Let's see which one I want. I can't read my own writing here. Okay, Leviticus 25. Let's see here. By the way, these are some scriptures that are just kind of strung together here. All right, this is one of the things that he was talking about. Leviticus 25:39 says, "If any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to you, do not make them work as a slave." Okay, now he's referring to Israelites. Okay, so keep that in mind that he is referring to Israelites. Okay, let me come out of that. Let's go to vid 2.
Servant type of thing, where a family member may have another family member become a slave because they couldn't feed them, and they wanted that they needed to generate some income for their family. Or someone who's gotten into debt may sell themselves out into slavery. But even then, there was like a 6-year limit to that.
Yeah, there were limits to it.
All right, let's go back and read what he's referring to here. Okay, and if you notice, remember, they're not reading that. They're not talking about that. So let's see. Exodus. Oh, okay, Exodus 21. That's what I'm going to look for here. Exodus 21. And where you at, Exodus here? Well, let me scroll down. Exodus. Oh, here's what I'm. Now, that's not what I want. Here, just. I'm gonna get to it. This is my fastest route here. I'm gonna come back to you. Exodus 21. Here we go. So listen to this one. This is Exodus 21 and then 2 through 6. It says, "If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve for you 6 years. But in the 7th year, he shall go free without paying anything." Now, I want you. The reason I'm going to harp on this for a moment, because what they try to, again, misinformation is to say that the Bible did not condone the kind of slavery that America practiced. In other words, because remember, America is supposed to be a Christian nation. We'll get into that more later, but they're gonna. If you say, well, kind of America got its idealism from the Bible, and they're gonna say, well, the Bible wasn't like that. And if you notice, he half quoted the verse of scripture. In fact, he didn't. He quoted it. They're not even reading it. But let's read kind of everything that he's saying here, and keep this in mind. This is the law of Moses. Okay, this is the law of Moses. All right. If you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year he should go free without paying anything. But let's keep reading. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife, when he comes, in other words, he comes as, and this is what you would call, again, indentured service. This is what he was talking about. This situation here came about because maybe he got in debt. He was poor or whatever. Okay, so this indentured servitude, the servitude for the Hebrew, now keep this in mind, this is only for the Hebrew, was only the last 6 years he was to go free. Here is the regulations on that. Here is the commands on that. So if he comes alone, he can go out alone. If he comes with a wife, then he says she can go with him. If his master gives him a wife during the 7 years, okay, if the master gives him a wife and she bears him sons and daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. Let me read this next one here. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and my children, and I do not want to go free, then the master must take him before the judges. Now, this is the Hebrew now. Understand that this is the Jew. And he shall take him to the door and to the doorpost and pierce his ear with an awl. Then he will be his servant for life. Now this is all now known as the bond servant. And if you read your New Testament, you will see that the Paul and Peter and a lot of the writers refer to themselves as bond servants of Jesus Christ. This is where they kind of get the concept from. In other words, I have no freedom outside that. I love my master. Okay. But in the natural, right, notice that the slave, that's the slavery that's in the DNA here. In other words, if you come without any children or wife, you have to leave without it. If you come with a wife, you can go with a wife. But if you have children during that 7-year period, notice what he says. They belong to your master. Right? All right. So, yes, that is slavery there. Okay, let's do vid 3. All right, vid 3.
Important difference. I want to make sure that everybody catches your point before we go too far into what the Bible says about slavery. When it comes to race, the Bible doesn't make that distinction. God seems utterly unconcerned about identifying people according to their skin tone. And, you don't hear verses about, well, lighter skinned people, darker skinned people. Like, the Bible's not concerned with that. Our culture is obsessed with skin color right now.
Yes.
And so if we're going to think about things in a distinctly Christian way, we have to know that that is not how God necessarily, like, the first thing on his mind is not, well, what color is their skin?
So let's kind of unpack that. Remember, the sole purpose of this YouTube channel is to defend white people. Her name is Krista. She's a white woman. And so she is coming from the perspective, I'm tired of all of this race talk. I feel like I'm getting beat up. So when she says that God is not concerned with race, well, let's unpack that for a moment. Because what she means is, black people, y'all stop talking about race. What she doesn't mean is, who introduced race in the first place? See, in other words, why is there such a race problem in America? Who started it? White people started it. They started it with slavery. They continued it with Jim Crow. Now later I'm going to break down how they did that and the reason why it still lingers in the minds and hearts of people. Of people. So when she said, well, but God doesn't care about race, you need to tell white people that. And yes, you need to tell black people, you need to tell Asians, you need to tell all peoples. But when it comes to America, you first and foremost have to tell white people because they started it. If you want to expand it beyond, you have to tell Europeans where slavery, the targeting of a particular people came from. So when she said God is not thinking about race, that's half true. But I would also push back and to say that God is very much thinking about race, because who created the different skin tones, right? Who created the different ethnicities? Asians, Indians, Europeans, Africans, South Americans. We can go on and on and on. Who created them? God did. The problem is not the fact that God created ethnicities, but when you have one who says, mine is superior to yours, yours is inferior to mine, and who introduced that? Okay, I'm going to stop it here, guys. No, you know what? I got to finish one other thing here. Let's see. No, I'm going to stop it here. I'm going to pick this up in part 2. Okay, I'm going to pick this up in part 2 of I'm debating if I should. Okay, correction. I'm going to finish out this video and then pick it up in verse 2. Here we go.
Right. Like I said, race is not a biblical concept. God dealt with people by nations. He dealt with the Israelites, the Canaanites, the Hittites. He didn't deal with the blacks. He didn't deal with the whites. There was no such thing as a concept. Black.
Okay, now here's what I want to show before I'm going to close out, and I'll probably pick it up in part 2. Leviticus. Let's go to Leviticus. Let's go to Leviticus. Okay, here we go. Now, I want to read something here, and then I am going to come back to this verse in part 2. But look at this is Leviticus. Leviticus 25, verses 44 through 41. He says, your male, now remember this is the law of Moses. Your male and female slaves are to come from nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. This is Moses, the law of Moses. He says, you may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country. Note, born in your country. So they wasn't even considered citizens, even though they were born in Israel. He says, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life. But you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. So you see the difference here? You can't treat Israelites like that. But anyone else, now remember he said that God dealt with the Hittites and the Jebusites and all that. Well, Moses just said everyone he just listed you could buy and own and keep as property and pass down as inheritance, as property. Yes, that's some deep stuff. We're not finished. We're going to pick this up in part 2. And like I say, yes. And it's ouch, I admit. All right, guys, look, don't forget to like and share this video. And subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. Hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in part 2 of Unpacking Misinformation to Defend White People.